Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. I'm reading The Wheel of Time for the first time and sharing the experience with you. This is One Good Turn, The Eye of the World, and today we are covering Chapter 14! So I've been moving around a bit lately, which means my recording situation has not been as consistent as I would prefer it to be. Which in turn means that I've taken about 2 to 2.5 weeks off in between the last chapter and this chapter. Now, I read 14 right after I finished editing 13, and with the Wheel of Time specifically, I like to be meticulous about read a chapter, edit it right away type thing. So I didn't feel like recording a bunch of episodes during my travels and letting a backlog of episodes that needed to be edited occur, because at a certain point it becomes overwhelming. I don't mind doing that with the Sanderson stuff because I don't want to stop reading that stuff. Anyway, I've gone into this explanation a bit longer, I think, than I had initially intended. The crux of why I am bringing it up is about 2.5 weeks between when I first read the chapter and when I just finished rereading it now. My big takeaway from the first read through was the second half of the chapter, and I just completely forgot about the first half. So, as I went back into rereading it today, I remembered that it occurred. When I realized that we weren't starting in the dream, I was like, oh yeah, all of this stuff happened too. But I suppose that this speaks specifically to the impact that the dream had on me. That is what stuck out first and foremost in my memory. The D&D party makes it to the inn, and the innkeeper is talking to them. The innkeeper seems very nice. In fact, Moraine calls him trustworthy and well-intentioned and all of that. But he's talking about the troubles of the world. They are very, very busy at the inn, that all of the people from the mountains and the hills and so on are coming into the city because of the winter, because of the crops. He's running low on food, although that specific element we'll get into when they have dinner. Anyway, the innkeeper is very, very kind, talking about how much of a pleasure it is to have them. Rand's mind is very much in this mode of comparing this new inn to the inn at home, the Wine Spring Inn. Lan heads off and Rand thinks that he would like to follow, but the environment, meaning the people in the inn, would appreciate him more if he were clean. He wants a bath. Rand wanted to follow him, but he wanted a bath even more. He could have done with people and laughing right then, but the common room would appreciate his presence more when he was clean. Matt and Perrin apparently felt the same. Matt was scratching surreptitiously. But then we get some more information about these white cloaks. Moraine is fishing for that information. Obviously, she has a vested interest, I guess you could say, in what happened with the Aes Sedai that were mentioned in the last chapter. Master Fitch, I understand there are children of the light in Berlon. Is there likely to be trouble?
Oh, never you worry about them, Mistress Alice. They're up to their usual tricks. Claim there's an Aes Sedai in the town. Don't you worry. They've tried it before. There's no Aes Sedai in Berlon, and the governor knows it. The White Cloaks think if they show an Aes Sedai, some woman they claim is an Aes Sedai, people will let all of them inside the walls. Well, I suppose some would, but most people know what the White Cloaks are up to, and they support the governor. No one wants to see some harmless old lady hurt just so the children can have an excuse for whipping up a frenzy.
So the Children of the Light are, I think, generally mistrusted. And I like the way that the innkeeper speaks. I think he has a very distinctive way of speaking. The way the dialogue is written, that grants him some Big C character. But it's done, I think, in a bit of a subtle way. So, it's not overdone. Moraine asks about someone named Min and expresses an interest in speaking with her. Moraine and Egwene head off, and Rand and the others follow a guy named Ara, who is a young man who works at the inn, I believe, because they're going to go to take a bath. Rand tries asking him some questions. I really like this segment, this little bit of flavor to these interactions, Rand tried asking Ara about Bear Lawn, but the man barely said 2 words together except to say Rand had a funny accent, and then the first sight of the bath chamber drove all thoughts of talk right out of Rand's head. Specifically that bit about the funny accent. It's interesting. I'm in my casual time reading Stone of Farewell, and there are characters and their accents are put into the dialogue, some of the characters. And I've heard mixed opinions, I guess, on whether or not that's a thing that you want to do. I guess nowadays it's not in much style to write the accent into the dialogue in that way. Like replacing the G with an apostrophe at the end of words that end in G, like nothing, sort of a thing. It is another subtle way of really emphasizing to us that Rand is not just a foreigner, but that he is in a place that is foreign to him. They've traveled far. They get to the baths, and Perrin makes a cute comment about it being almost as good as the baths at the Wine Spring Inn. I like Perrin. I don't recall if I've mentioned it prior to this or not, but I feel like of all the characters, Perrin is the least well fleshed out thus far. But I like the loyalty of it. He seems very similar in personality to Rand, I think, which might be why I feel this way. As they're bathing, Ara asks if there's trouble down country. He eyes the sword. He eyes the axe or the hammer. Perrin's axe. And Rand sort of turns it back around on him. Some of the exchange is there trouble down country too? In the rivers or whatever you call it? Then Rand says, what do you mean too? Is there some kind of trouble here? So then Ara responds, here? Trouble? Miners having fistfights in the street in the dark of the morning aren't trouble. Or, I meant the Gil Dawn kind of trouble. No, I suppose not. Nothing but sheep down country, is there? No offense. I just meant it's quiet down there. Still, it's been a strange winter. Strange things in the mountains. I heard the other day there were Trollocs up in Saldea, but that's the borderlands then, isn't it? Rand hears the word Trollocs and, tenses, but he tries to play it off. Rand is smart. And Mat, very dumb, starts talking about Trollocs. And fortunately, Rand, Perrin, and Tom are all very smart and try to cover for the stupidity. They write it off as Mat preparing to tell one of Tom's own stories, and Mat dully doesn't really get what it is that he's just done. A part of me wonders if... because I was surprised that they so openly claimed to be from the Two Rivers. That there was an interaction earlier where they talk about how they're from the Two Rivers. Again, it's Mat, actually. But technically, it sounded like Ara already knew they were from the rivers, as he referred to it at first. But I wondered if it looked like they were all covering too hard for Mat, such as to come off as perhaps a bit suspicious. Fortunately, Lan comes in and puts a stop to it all. He sends Ara away, specifically. He reiterates grimly to trust no one, essentially. Don't talk about Trollocs. Don't even think about Trollocs. Blood and ashes. You had better remember, the Dark One has eyes and ears where you least expect. And if the Children of the Light heard Trollocs were after you, they'd be burning to get their hands on you. To them, it would be as much as naming you Dark Friend. It may not be what you are used to, but until we get where we are going, keep your trust small unless Mistress Alice or I tell you differently. At his emphasis on the name Moraine was using, Mat flinched. So he... because later on in the chapter, it's known that they are going to be staying there for a day and a half, 2 days-ish. And admittedly, when I read that, I get a bit nervous. I'll reiterate that point, I think, when we actually get to it. Rand smartly warns Lan of something that he thinks is suspicious. There was something that fellow wouldn't tell us. Something he thought was trouble, but he wouldn't say what it was. Probably the children. Most people consider them trouble. Some don't, though, and he did not know you well enough to risk it. You might have gone running to the White Cloaks for all he knew. They talk a bit more about Trollocs in Saldea, and Lan insists that their task is to get the group to Tar Valon alive. They leave the bathing area, and Rand notes Moraine is talking to a slender girl who's dressed like a boy, and Moraine lets them know they've got a room in which to dine, private. Rand reflects on just how alone the group is right now, how alone those from the Two Rivers are specifically. Moraine and Lan are still at least a little bit untrustworthy to them, and they aren't supposed to trust anyone else. It seemed they could not trust anyone but themselves, and he was still not too sure how far they could trust Moraine or Lan. Just themselves. And Egwene was still Egwene. Moraine said it would have happened to her anyway, this touching the true source. She had no control over it, and that meant it was not her fault, and she was still Egwene. At which point there's a bittersweet? Melancholic? There's an interaction. He opened his mouth to apologize, but Egwene stiffened and turned her back before he could get a word out. Staring sullenly at her back, he swallowed what he had been going to say. All right, then. If she wants to be like that, there's nothing I can do. So they all sit down to dinner, and the innkeeper is droning on and on about how the food stores are running low because of the winter, and there are any number of issues, and then he catches himself and politely leaves. Once he and the servers leave, Lan waits a moment and then goes and makes sure that there's no one outside of the dining room. Egwene says, I know you say not to trust anyone, but if you suspect the innkeeper, why stay here? And essentially, Lan trusts no one, including half the people in Tar Valon, which makes Tar Valon seem like it won't be the safe haven that they are hoping it might be. Moraine claims that Lan is exaggerating, but despite Master Fitch being a good man, honest and trustworthy, he does like to talk, and with the best will in the world, he might let something slip. Rand seems to understand. I hope, Matt, it sinks in. Moraine and Lan discuss the gossip regarding what happened in Gale Dawn. We get the name Logain. So I guess Logain is the person claiming to be the Dragon Reborn. There are claims that the Aes Sedai lost the fight. There are claims that the Aes Sedai turned to his side. There's a little bit of talk later on regarding the Dragon Reborn dancing on the strings of the Aes Sedai, which is quite ominous. So the idea that the Aes Sedai might have joined the Dragon Reborn, it's interesting to know what the Aes Sedai perceive the expected relationship to be between them and the Dragon Reborn. They discuss the White Cloaks, and Lan says, there the news is better. No odd happenings, no strangers around who might be Murdral, certainly no Trollocs, and the White Cloaks are busy trying to make trouble for Governor Adden because he won't cooperate with them. They will not even notice us unless we advertise ourselves. I don't know that they'll be intentionally going around advertising themselves, but I do not believe that they are going to be able to leave the city without some interaction with at least one White Cloak by the end of this. So I will be very curious to see what happens there. Moraine says, we have a long journey still ahead of us, but the last week has not been easy either, so I propose to remain here tonight and tomorrow night, and leave early the following morning. So I read that and I think you should leave right away. Maintain pace. I know it's hard, but maintain pace if you want to make serious gains. But the kids are very excited to have some time in the city. The following line says, all the younger folk grinned, a city for the first time. I read that and I had nightmares of Matt and Perrin running off and getting themselves into trouble. Seriously. I can't imagine Moraine or Lan just letting them freely go and run about without supervision of some sort. I imagine pickpockets stealing from them, not that they necessarily have anything of value to steal, maybe the sword and the axe. I wonder if Tom is going to play babysitter, which could be interesting. I think about getting robbed and beaten. Not all threats are the world-ending threats. Sometimes they're just cruel people that will do bad things. I'm a little anxious over the possible shenanigans to come over the next 2 days. And it doesn't help that Tom emphasizes it when he says, these country folk loose in a city. They divide themselves up into their rooms. Lan does what Lan does. Tom gets his instruments out and goes down to play. Rand reflects on how just a week ago he would have given just about anything to be able to be in an inn in a city listening to a gleeman, but having listened to the gleeman for a week, he's just too exhausted, too tired, and he goes straight to sleep. Then the dream starts. He finds himself in a trippy hallway with no exits. There's very evocative language. I'll read the first paragraph. The stone hallway was dim and shadowy and empty, except for Rand. He could not tell where the light came from, what little there was of it. The gray walls were bare of candles or lamps, nothing at all to account for the faint glow that seemed to just be there. The air was still and dank, and somewhere in the distance water dripped with a steady, hollow plunk. Wherever this was, it was not the inn. Frowning, he rubbed at his forehead. Inn? His head hurt, and thoughts were hard to hold on to. There had to be something about an inn? It was gone, whatever it was. This was a fascinating part of the chapter, because he does that forgetfulness thing to great effect. He has trouble thinking, very hazy-brained. And the other thing that he emphasizes a lot in this chapter, he licked his lips and wished he had something to drink. He was awfully thirsty, dry as dust thirsty. And there's dripping water that he hears. So for me, at least, I was sort of able to clue in quick enough. This is supposed to be sort of a hellish dreamscape. I don't know if it's literally hell that he has, like, astral projected into or something to that effect, but you get this endless evil. There's even heat. It's very hot. He's looking around, he's walking around, nowhere seems to lead anywhere. He sees the sky. Striated clouds in blacks and grays, reds and oranges streamed by as if storm winds drove them, weaving and interweaving endlessly. No one could ever have seen a sky like that. It could not exist. He continues exploring. There are doors that he can't open, high-backed chairs. It's a sort of a palace-like or castle-like environment. And a man stood in front of the fireplace. He had not noticed the man when he first came in. If he had not known it was impossible, he would have said no one had been there until he actually looked at the man. Dressed in dark clothes of a fine cut, he seemed in the prime of his maturity, and Rand supposed women would have found him good-looking. My immediate thought was, oh, this is Alon. Neat. But it becomes evident quickly enough that it isn't. It is the Dark One himself. Once more we meet face to face, the man said, and just for an instant his mouth and eyes became openings into endless caverns of flame. Just being in this same room, Rand is freaking out. He's telling himself, it's a dream, it's a dream. And he's running away, he's trying to get out, but he can't. You cannot get away from me that easily, the man said. He's telling himself it's a nightmare. He does this thing that he heard from the wisdom, that if you close your eyes in a dream, you can force yourself to wake up. But then that thought slips away from him again with that hazy brainness of the place. There was a part of me that wondered if, because there was a passage about a mirror and how he didn't have a defined shape in the mirror, like it was a fuzzy reflection. I wondered if it was Rand in the body of one of the previous Dragon Reborns. He's telling himself it's a dream. And the man says, is it a dream? Does it matter? You seem thirsty. Drink. And he offers, this is the interaction that stuck out with me the absolute most of this chapter. I think it might be my favorite part of the chapter and the book thus far. You seem thirsty, the man by the fire said. Drink. On the table was a goblet, shining gold and ornamented with rubies and amethysts. It had not been there before. He wished he could stop jumping. It was only a dream. His mouth felt like dust. I am. A little, he said, picking up the goblet. The man leaned forward intently, one hand on the back of a chair, watching him. The smell of spiced wine drove home to Rand just how thirsty he was, as if he had nothing to drink in days. Have I? With the wine halfway to his mouth, he stopped. Whispers of smoke were rising from the chair back between the man's fingers, and those eyes watched him so sharply, flickering rapidly in and out of flames. Rand licked his lips and put the wine back on the table, untasted. I'm not as thirsty as I thought. Just the man leaning in, the intensity of wanting him to drink was so visceral for me. What could possibly happen if Rand drank. I'm so curious. I want to know. There's a part of me that is like begging Rand to drink. I know nothing good can come of it, but I want to know what would have happened. Would it have been him inviting the taint? I mean, my current supposition would be, especially based off of a line the man says later, that the breaking of the world, what Lews Therin Telamon did at the end of his life, was to try to cleanse, if not the entire wheel of the taint, at least from him, such that maybe in the future, a future Dragon Reborn would be able to access the power without being tainted, kind of a thing. So I'm wondering if that would have tainted Rand. There's a part of me that was really hoping for a Shades of Grey kind of element out of this story. So to a point, I was hoping Rand would have some sort of conversation with the Dark One here. And the Dark One's going to go on later to talk about how he's going to be the puppet at the strings of the Aes Sedai. And I'm like, I don't want him to be anyone's puppet. I want to see Rand have his own autonomy, and I'm sure he'll get there. I'm sure once he gets a sense of the landscape, once he has greater understanding of who he is, what the obligations that he holds are, and what the different political entities, if you can call the Dark One and the Aes Sedai political entities, are, he'll be able to be his own force. I think I'm rambling a little bit now. Point being, I cannot emphasize just how much I loved this one interaction and what the many implications of all of it could be. But he rejects it, and that is good, and that speaks to his innate goodness, which in no small part I think contributes to what makes him the Dragon Reborn. There's a part of me that wonders if the others are having these dreams too, if it is the dream specifically that signals the Dragon Reborn, because it's noteworthy that he doesn't tell. He's worried about telling Moraine about the dreams. Anyway, Rand asks who he is and what he wants, and the man says, "Some call me Baalzamon." Rand freaks out and tries to get out again because it's the Dark One. The Dark One monologues for a bit, and it's all things that the forces of darkness can only conceive someone of good wanting. "Are you expecting glory? Power? Did they tell you the eye of the world would serve you? What glory or power is there for a puppet? The strings that move you have been centuries weaving. Your father was chosen by the White Tower like a stallion roped and led to his business. Your mother was no more than a broodmare to their plans, and those plans lead to your death." So much there. He said the title, the Eye of the World. The Eye of the World would serve you. What does that mean? What is this? That there's this thinking entity, this sentient entity that will owe its allegiance, or that is capable of granting allegiance. Maybe it's like a sword in the stone type situation, or a Thor's hammer type situation, or a Green Lantern's ring situation, where it is an object that will answer to the rightful owner type thing. We do know that there was a King Arthur reference earlier on, Arthur Pendrag Tanriel. We get the line about the father and mother, and I have to wonder, is he referring to Tam, or is he referring to the actual birth parents? But mentioning the father, you get, I think, a bit of insight into how one can fight the Dark One, which is with good old righteous fury. Rand's hands knotted in fists. "My father is a good man, and my mother was a good woman. Don't you talk about them." The flames laughed. "So there is some spirit in you after all. Perhaps you are the one. Little good it will do you. The Amerlin seat will use you until you are consumed, just as Davian was used, and Urien Stonebow, and Gwaire Amalison, and Raolin Darksbane, just as Loghain is being used. Used until there is nothing left of you." "I don't know." Rand swung his head from side to side. That one moment of clear thinking, born in anger, was gone. Even as he groped for it again, he could not remember how he had reached it the first time. So his mind goes back to the haze, but I think it is the righteous fury, the love of his parents, the love of family, all things that the Dark One here, when he's talking about, do you want glory, do you want power, he cannot conceive of as someone wanting. And we get some names, and again, that whole puppetry thing. And it's hard to tell how much of it is just him trying to sow distrust in Rand, distrust seeming like a Dark One thing to me, or how much of it is accurate. Just because the Dark One is the Dark One doesn't mean that everything he says is a lie. So Rand should be skeptical of everyone. But too big a dose of that and you go down the paranoia route, which is nervous making. Rand says, he forced the words out, his voice strengthening the further he went. You are bound in Shaial Ghul. You and all the Forsaken, bound by the Creator until the end of time.
The end of time. You live like a beetle under a rock, and you think your slime is the universe. The death of time will bring me power such as you could not dream of, worm. You are bound? Fool! I have never been bound!
The fires of his face roared so hot that Rand stepped back, sheltering behind his hands. The sweat on his palms dried from the heat.
I stood at Lews Therin Kinslayer's shoulder when he did the deed that named him. It was I who told him to kill his wife and his children, and all his blood, and every living person who loved him or whom he loved. It was I who gave him the moment of sanity to know what he had done. Have you ever heard a man scream his soul away, worm? He could have struck at me then. He could not have won, but he could have tried. Instead, he called down his precious one power upon himself, so much that the earth split open and reared up Dragonmount to mark his tomb. 1,000 years later, I sent the Trollocs ravening south, and for 3 centuries they savaged the world. Those blind fools in Tar Valon said I was beaten in the end, but the Second Covenant, the Covenant of the 10 Nations, was shattered beyond remaking, and who was left to oppose me then? I whispered in Otter Hotwing's ear, and the length and breadth of the land Aes Sedai died. I whispered again, and the High King sent his armies across the Aerith Ocean, across the World Sea, and sealed 2 dooms. The doom of his dream of one land and one people, and a doom yet to come. At his deathbed I was there when his counselors told him only Aes Sedai could save his life. I spoke, and he ordered his counselors to the stake. I spoke, and the High King's last words were to cry that Tar Valon must be destroyed. When men such as these could not stand against me, what chance do you have? A toad crouching beside a forest puddle. You will serve me, or you will dance on Aes Sedai strings until you die. Then you will be mine. The dead belong to me.
Rand is reiterating, it's a dream, it's a dream. It's a very scary sequence. It's a bit monologue-y, but quite scary nonetheless. A little bit exposition-y. The Dark One asserts,
Do you think you are safe from me in your dreams? Look!
And then the Dark One does something truly, truly unforgivable in my book. Not my, physical book, I mean, in my opinion. He tortures a rat. So, screw you, Dark One. Any hope of gray I was hoping for from Rand is gone. This guy, the Dark One, unredeemable. How dare you? Rats are adorable. Rand is denying what's happening. Anything can happen in a dream. And the Dark One taunts him to go to the Aes Sedai then and tell the Amyrlin seat of this dream. And I think he's right. Rand shouldn't do that because the Aes Sedai have not earned Rand's trust yet. And I do think, well, it's skeptical. You get the sense in this chapter that the White Cloaks probably would kill Rand, and to a not small degree, I do trust Moiraine wants what is best for the kids, even if her methods of coercion are questionable. But there has been emphasis earlier on in some of the chapters that the bureaucracy, the Amyrlin seat, I guess, there are factions within the Aes Sedai that probably don't want what's best for Rand and the group. Rand forces himself to wake up. He does. I'm surprised he didn't wake up screaming, because he doesn't want to tell Moraine about the dream's point could have been made moot if he did wake up screaming and Lan was there and heard it. But that's not what happens. He wakes up, no one's the bother, and he questions whether or not to go to Moraine about the dreams. He tries to find the calmness of the void the way his father taught him, which again, I think is a very big Dragon Reborn thing. And then the chapter ends. Strong chapter. Liked it quite a lot. It definitely feels like we're in a new part of the book now. That dream was almost like a transition chapter in a way. I don't mean that in any way as a pejorative. I mean, it's like we've made it to the city. The beginning has ended. Now we're in the unknown world. I think that's all I got for now. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye.